Hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie Baxter. I am the Director of Programming and Engagement at the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. For those who aren't, we are a statewide technology association for the tech industry in New Hampshire. We do quite a bit of work in all different areas in the tech space. And what you're here for today is part of our startup programming, which we're excited to launch some new programming for 2022. One of those being this webinar series, Startup Funding Explained, where we look at different, we had a webinar last week that explained the different types of funding, when it's appropriate to use it. All of these are recorded and on our website and our YouTube channel as well to be able to reference in the future. And then we have the presentation today about how to construct your pitch and have an effective pitch. And then next week, we'll have our final presentation, hearing from different companies about how they used funding to grow and scale their businesses. So I'll be sharing the links for all of that in the chat during this presentation today. And just a little bit more about the startup programming that we do. We offer office hours monthly that startups can participate in and schedule 30-minute meetings with subject matter experts. And we also have a resource guide on our website as you're starting your business, growing your business. There's all sorts of resources available within New Hampshire to support you. So we hope you're checking those out on our website as well. Just a bit about the platform today. There is a Q&A tab if you have any questions. And like I said, we'll be using the chat as well. So we'd like to thank Coughlin for sponsoring this webinar series. We can't do any of the work we do without our amazing sponsors, and we're very appreciative for everybody who we work with, and very appreciative of Coughlin today, who helps us get this programming out and available to the community as a great resource for startups as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Matt Benson. He's corporate attorney from Coughlin, also a NHTA board member and a great supporter of the Alliance. So I'd like to welcome Matt on stage.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for agreeing to join us here today. We have a bunch of information that we'd like to share with you about the process of how to successfully raise capital, and in particular what the pitch should look like. So we've got a great couple of panelists with us today. Both Adam and Rita have experiences on different sides of this. I'd like to ask Adam to join us here for a minute, and if he could do a quick introduction, that would be great.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Adam Coughlin, and I am one of the co-founders and chief marketing officer of York IE. Is there a bad echo?
You sound okay to me, Adam.
Okay, maybe I'm just hearing it on my end. Oh no, it sounds good. And York IE is a strategic growth and investment firm, so we help early stage B2B software companies primarily grow. We do that both here locally in New Hampshire and then all over the country, and more and more all over the world. So very excited to be here.
Awesome. So thanks, Adam. And Rita, you could give us a quick introduction.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. The echo is still pretty bad, so I am trying to hear myself. I had a little bit of trouble hearing Adam, so hopefully we'll be able to make an introduction. So I'm the regional director for New Hampshire SBDC for Center and North of New Hampshire. We do small business advising for New Hampshire small businesses. This is a collaborative effort between UNH, SBA, and the state of New Hampshire. I have been working with New Hampshire SBDC for the past 2.5 years. I've seen over 200 startup companies, total of 400 plus companies that we helped and advised to. It's been an exciting journey, and I'm happy and looking forward to share all the learnings that I have with you.
Great. So thanks, Adam. Thanks, Rita. We have just about an hour total time, which hopefully will be enough. I know there's a lot that we want to cover, so I figure we could just kind of dive right in. I mean, when you do a pitch, as you may know, it really is an opportunity to sell yourself and to sell the company to potential investors and others. It's really an art and a science both. You're going to hear some pieces of that, I think, in the presentation today about, what should you make sure you include or exclude, what should the agenda look like. But there's also a lot of art to it, and preparation and thoughtfulness that needs to go into a successful pitch. So, just to start off with a couple of initial questions, I'd love to hear both from Adam and from Rita. I mean, how long would you expect a pitch to be? When should the entrepreneur kind of include the initial hook to make sure that they're doing what they can to have the investor or other party interested? So, Rita, what's your thoughts on that to start?
Yeah, good question, Matt. I think the length of the pitch will absolutely depend on the audience, right? There are different types of audience. Sometimes it's a public pitch to gather social attention and social approval, or maybe a competition, or it could be a pitch for investors where significantly longer amount of time is allotted to present well and look into more detail. So the length of the pitch will definitely depend on the audience, and we're going to talk about the audience a lot today, right? How important it is to understand the audience. But I would advise in any case, and whoever your audience is, your emotional hook, which we're also going to discuss in depth, the emotional hook it's 100% should go to the beginning. You have about 5 to 8 seconds to engage the audience and glue the audience to the seat so they are vested in the information that you're about to share. And that emotional hook is kind of like your, make it or break it. Can they relate to your emotional hook? And that really should go to the beginning. That should be the big announcement to the project or the idea that you're pitching. Adam, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think Matt makes a good point about how it's good to remember that a pitch is a sales pitch. And so you have to sell. Professor Scott Galloway says that entrepreneur is just another word for salesperson. But to do that, you have to be authentic, right? And you have to find what's right for you. And if you are trying to be Mark Cuban and you're not Mark Cuban, then it just comes off disingenuous and works against you. The other thing to remember, which is the point that Rita made, which is people actually have a shorter attention span than goldfish. It's like less than 5 seconds. And so the way that I look at slides is that sort of like each slide should earn your opportunity to talk about the next slide. And knowing that, though, that in any of these situations, the best laid plans of mice and men can sometimes go astray and everything can be blown up. But as far as length, you want to obviously cover the main points, but we often get a lot of decks that are 35 slides long, and that's a little lazy in the sense of like, you got to like think about, it's a really opportunity to take those, start with the 35 slides and then figure out how you whittle that down into something that's much more manageable. We're going to talk a little bit about a template of the major areas that we think are important to be covered. But sometimes.
Yeah. So there's a famous quote, and I think it's been attributed to Benjamin Franklin and maybe others. And it's something like, I apologize for the length of my letter, but I did not have time to write you a shorter one, right? So that just goes to the point where sometimes it actually takes more effort to get into the pitch, to get into the deck, and to figure out where the critical points really are, and to figure out a way to more concisely make the points that need to be made. So great point. So with that, I think what would be helpful is to get into some of what should go into the actual deck itself. We've got an agenda of topics that we'll cover. We'll kind of go through them one by one. There's a total of eight topics that we want to address. There'll be a slide at the end of the presentation that kind of encapsulates all of those points, and a second slide that also provides some tips to you that you can take with you, and we can provide copies of those slides to anyone that's interested. Please reach out to Stephanie if you would like a copy of any of the slides. So why don't we just kind of dive right in? One of the first things that you want to make sure that you cover in the pitch deck is the problem and the solution that you've got for the problem. So Adam, what's your thoughts on kind of part one of what would go into the pitch deck?
This is the point that Rita was talking about, which was like the hook and catching somebody's attention, right? Why do startups even exist? Like a startup exists because they think that the status quo or whatever the problem is that is being solved today is not working, right? I always say when I talk to companies that the first thing Henry Ford had to do was beat up the horse, right? Because if you don't show the flaws in the current way that things are being done, people aren't going to be receptive to the new paradigm that you're trying to create, right? And creating that juxtaposition at the beginning, here is this problem, and then here is how we can solve it, gives you sort of the right to then talk about, okay, who's the team going to do this? How are we going to do this? What do we think? And everything like that, right? When we think about pitching, particularly in the early stage, we work with a lot of companies in that pre-seed, seed stage. There isn't a ton of traction, right? They don't have a ton of have that product market fit. They're not at that A round where they're like, hey, we have product market fit. We're raising money to go put kind of fuel on the fire. And this one, they're like, hey, we're raising this money particularly to kind of test some of these theories that we've developed. And so that's where, like, for us, the two things that we're looking at is the market. Do we believe in this market? And right. And so that's where, like, establishing, hey, here is this problem that needs to be solved. And then we also look at the people. Are these the people that are right to solve that problem? And so I think that's why that's so important to, like, get that as quickly into the thing as possible, because then if the investor buys that this is the problem, they're willing to then learn more about you as the solution.
Yeah. So, for example, at SBDC, we do have pitch clinics occasionally, and occasionally it's quarterly. And I've seen it many, many times when an idea is getting pitched to us, and they just jump through that problem statement. They make the mistake of either go and jump to the ask, like, we are here today to ask you for such and such, before the problem was stated, or before the size of the market was discussed, or before the solution was even talked about. So a lot of times I go through pitches where you have a lot of head scratches. It's like, okay, good, but what are you selling, right? And sometimes if you jump through the problem statement that is not articulated well, you're missing out on an opportunity to kind of highlight your future potential in the market. So imagine this as a flow of from trigger, which is your emotional and hook slide, to talk about action that leads to reward, and that leads to the investment, right? So it's a figure eight hook from trigger, action, reward, and investment. So after trigger, your action is to start showcasing your case, and really, talk a lot about your problem and solution, and state that problem as clear as possible. Not 7 to 8 bullet points of many problems that it solves, right? Because in any which way, unless you came up with a groundbreaking innovation, right, you will need to at least select one problem that your problem solves, where the market is likely the biggest, your go-to market is likely the fastest, and it's the most likely problem that you're solving that's going to lead to the likeliest biggest profit in the company, right? So don't go that you're solving everybody else's problem in 7, 8 different folds. Focus on your top problem statement.
One thing that I would just add to that, Matt, is that what we often see is either the problem's too small, and it's like, okay, what kind of company can be built here? Like, there is already a ceiling on it. Or the problem is too big, and it's like, really, like, how are you going to solve hunger or something like that, right? Like, the best ones are, we have a really clear path to solve, to get to point A, which then unlocks point B. And there is this really big opportunity ahead of us, but it's not, you know what I mean? And this is a good point about audience and who you're talking to, right? Because there are some investors that are like, we want only moonshots, massive scale companies that are going to disrupt the entire world, right? And then there are other investors who we want like built business that can go solve A and then B and then C, right? And so that, I think, when you're thinking about that problem, when you're thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, that's important to put there, because that's also important to make sure that you're talking to the right people in the pitch.
Yeah, and don't overshoot or undershoot. Yeah.
So I think part of what happens sometimes is, Rita, to your point, and also Adam, to yours, is that the problem is not sufficiently described because the entrepreneur is so focused on how great the solution is, right? But the solution and the importance of the solution really is only related to and relevant for fixing a particular problem. So don't skip over the problem, because that's really an important way to set the stage to make sure that the investors are going to be interested in what you have to offer, right? Could be a great solution, but if there's no problem to solve, no matter how good the technology is, you may not get very far. So I guess from here, I'd like to talk, and Adam, you started to get in a little bit to the team. And what I've heard a lot from investors is, if you summarize, quite often they'd rather invest in an A team with a B idea than a B team with an A idea. And I think that highlights the importance of the team. So I'd like to hear from both of you about the importance of the team, your view of that, and who some of the critical team members may be, and what the critical characteristics are of some of those team members. So Rita, do you want to start on that one?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure that Adam's going to talk a lot about teams and what are the good characteristics. I'm just going to start backwards a little bit, that beside a team, you might also want to add on that slide of your board of advisory that you're working with, right? Because, sometimes you might be a solopreneur. Maybe you have, 2, 3 core team members and you are outsourcing functions, right? So you could appear small. That might not be desirable in your pitches. But if you highlight that you do work well with professionals and you have a board of advisors and trusted members that you can lean on, that can also add a couple of additional, credentials to that team slide. Also highlighting that you know how to take feedback in, and you're a critical thinker that reaches out in order to get the best information for everybody, even if the team is small. So Adam, do you want to talk a little bit about what is an ideal team is comprised of?
Yeah, I think actually, and you just made a great point too, Rita, like one of the first things we want, is there a team, right? Which, like, just the fact that, like, sometimes we've had situations where, we've had founders and, we're talking with them and it seems like they don't have confidence in anybody else on their team, or they're trying to do everything themselves. And that is a red flag in and of itself, right? Because one of the things that we're looking for, particularly in the early stage, to your point, is coachability, right? Like, as an investor, we want somebody that's going to listen and not necessarily like do whatever we say, but at least have the understanding to like take in feedback, process it, and then make their own decisions. We want that. But like, you know what I mean? If they're already signaling that they don't have a very collaborative nature, that they're not really highlighting the other members of the team and that it's a collective, that kind of makes me a little nervous. And then, based on your sort of area of expertise that you're in, you need to have, complementary skill sets, right? Like, it's hard to be a technology company if you have, a business-led CEO, but no strong technical voice, right? And so you just want to have the different roles kind of played out. You want to have, at the stage of investment, probably an understanding of, hey, okay, here's the core team. We have this person. We're really complementary. We work together. We have different skill sets. We have different backgrounds. And we know where we have holes, right? Like, every company at this stage is going to have holes, and you want to be able to know, okay, with the addition of this resources, which are the ones that we're going to go plug to move things forward, right? And have everything aligned. So team is really important because, again, there's not a ton of traction. And to Matt's point, it's really like, are you betting on this team? At this stage, there's going to be a ton of iteration. There's going to be a ton of figuring things out. And it's like, do you feel that this team is going to be able to collectively figure it out and, be bigger than the sum of the parts?
So just a couple of quick follow-ups. So number one is, I've also run into the situation where you actually have a team that may be too big, or where the roles are not clarified, right? So the clarity of roles, I think, is important. But have you seen a situation where, the team has been too big, and actually you need to pare down, have one decision maker, for example, one person who's leading the charge? Or is your view that companies, even at an early stage, can effectively function and be successful with a bigger team?
So my first feedback to that comment is like, it's also really important to understand the difference between a startup and like an established company. I've seen so many times people have like, hey, we have this high-powered CMO that worked at this company, and this company is a VP of marketing, or they were a VP of sales at this company, and now they're going to be our VP of sales. And it's like, well, there's a very different working environment when you're the VP of sales at a company at scale with resources. And a lot of times people will find that actually it's the name on the front of the jersey that was opening up all of those conversations, not necessarily the name on the back. And so there's often that misalignment, right? And so you want to make sure that you have people on the team that are fully understanding and embracing the startup and all of the things that comes with that. You know, they always say like the CEO is also the custodian and has to be willing to do all of those things. And so that's where sometimes I see like they have this big name as their, say, salesperson or their marketing person, but who's actually doing the work?
So how do you assess the team, right? I mean, I think part of it is, what are you trying to assess? I think you can assess that somebody's a really good salesperson based on their history, for example, based on their resume. But how can you also assess that they're the right fit for a startup? I've run into cases before where somebody is asked to come on board and they're so focused on the salary they're going to be paid and their bonus structure. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur is saying, well, look, I don't have a lot of money, but I can give you some equity. And the person's like, I'm not sure that equity is really what I want to work for. You know, I have a mortgage I need to pay, for example. So how do you assess not only the skill sets of the team, but the fit within a startup, within the startup world?
Attitude. For me, and when I talk to, for example, a lot of, pitches that, like, for example, we have a client right now, they're going into the NFT market, 7 team members, there's no products created yet. They're pulling into 7 different directions, and who's supposed to be the team leader, the attitude doesn't match, right? So, you can kind of always identify the best team member who's not only looking at the endeavor as the cash cow in a way, right? They see the value behind the exploring of the startup idea, and not just a function or a unit of exchange. And I think it doesn't necessarily shows in a pitch, right? So it's really hard to filter through a pitch if all of the team members are who they ought to be. But when somebody's actually going into the funding process and going through the discovery process, that kind of shows its head relatively quickly of what the team synergy looks like. What are the leader voices in the team? Who are the weaker spots that might need some substitution if the team is overbearing, as Matt mentioned. So I think it does come down largely for attitude for me. Adam?
There's ways to kind of cultivate or like get to that attitude question early in the vetting process when you are the founder and you're having conversations. You always love to talk about the positive side of the startup, the infinite growth possibilities, the acceleration of the career. But then you also have to be very transparent about like what that means, which is like some of those processes, some of those things that you would expect to be in place at another company are they're non-existent. You are literally building the wings of the plane while you're flying it. And there are some people who are entrepreneurial, right? And like there's an entrepreneur, and then there's like entrepreneurial people. And entrepreneurial people can be in marketing and sales and finance and accounting and engineering. And then there are people that are more like point and shoot, like, I have a role, I know what I want to do, and I will do it. And those people are great, and you need tons of those people at scale. But in the early days, you need people that are comfortable with uncertainty. Because that is all.
So as we're going through the pitch, right, we talked about the problem, the solution, we talked about the importance of the team. And I think next up, we would want to talk about the product and the technology, and how best level should you talk about the technology. Some of these tech companies have technology that is very sophisticated, very intricate. How would you then, as part of the pitch deck, want to explain the product and the technology? How in the weeds do you get, or what's the most effective way to pitch your product and tech? Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One thing I want to make a point of is that I think after you have that problem and solution statement, the section that you go into next isn't necessarily chronological order. It should be in a position of strength based on your company, right? So if you have a kick-ass team, boom, that's the first thing, because that's what you want to establish, right? If you have a killer product that's really truly revolutionary, et cetera, you put that, you know what I mean? And so you kind of, that's why we look at them as like sort of these blocks that we're talking about, almost like Legos, and then you mix and match them based on the strength of your company, right? So when it comes to product, I think that you need to do two things sort of simultaneously, and that's like why I like to have 2 slides in this section. I think one, as Rita mentioned, you have to know your audience. You know, depending on thesis and everything like that, you may have sophisticated investors who truly understand the technology, or you may not. And I think the key, one of the things that I've always, having worked in technology, I used to believe that I was like an imposter. And I would get so intimidated because I never am going to know the tech as well as the people that I work with. But then I realized that what I need to do is understand the value that that tech brings and why somebody would actually pay for it, right? And why you can make a business out of that. And so you need to get that clearly across, the value prop, and then why there's a true business there. And then I do love to have a slide. So I love that slide that really makes it simple and understand why it's valuable. And then I love one slide that's like, oh, by the way, this is also really damn hard and complicated, and why it's not easily repeatable by somebody else in the market, right? So that combination. And then I've seen that work where the investor's like, okay, yep, this is beyond me. This is cool, good. I'm glad you got that. But I understand business-wise why this product solves a problem.
Yeah, I often recommend to keep it relatable, right, and keep it simple. And keep it relatable, like you can use channels of like, okay, so this is the main and primary competition that we're going after, right? And this is what we do better than the competition. With some luck, your audience already have experience with a competitive product, service, or tech element or piece. So it will be relatable for them. It's like, it's like something similar to this, but you do this better than they do. Okay, I'm interested. And a lot of times I also see a mistake about getting too much in the woods with technical terms and details, whether if it's a medical device, whether if it's a tech application, it's the jargon, right? People like to boast at jargons because maybe that is their normal state of language and verbiage to use within Office and within other developers and among themselves. But knowing your audience, your investors might not actually understand that jargon, right? So and you can lose audience right there. So without risking the chance of losing your audience, just try to simplify the message as much as you can. And echoing Adam, if you have the chance and the time, put that second slide in. That is like, by the way, it is actually a lot more convoluted and complicated than I made it to seem like, right? So this is the back office for what am I to say, but relate and simplify in order to keep that engagement with your audience. And the faster they understand your problem, go-to-market strategy, your solution, and so on, it's likelier that you are going to get less torn apart when it comes to questions.
So now we've built the problem and the solution. We've got a team. We've had a chance to talk that through. You've gone through the product and the technology, and it's all kind of coming together now. And the next big question really is, well, is there a market for this great team to try to get this problem solved, right? Is there a market for the problem? Is there a chance that the market will like your solution? So how would you suggest that the entrepreneurs talk about the market and the market opportunity? How aggressive should they be? Should they be concerned about exaggerating too much the size of the market? How should they describe the size of the market in a way that's meaningful? Rita, what are your thoughts?
Well, before we jump into the market, right, and we're going to go, the exploitation, the different phases and so on, I want to pause at the product side of things a little bit, because I really do think that we need to touch up on IP, right? And what does the product means, and how is the product protectable? Because if the product is protectable, the go-to-market strategy will look very different than to a parity product that does not have IP protection. Were you able to file trademarks, copyrights for codes, or any kind of patent pending, even provisional? Because if you do so, let's say in an e-commerce, if you have trademark, your go-to-market strategy on an e-commerce the situation will be much different than without trademarks and copyright. So it's important to highlight that that you solidify that not only that you just came up with this awesome idea, but you also have ways to protect it, and that increases the value at the end of your pitch regardless. But it also somewhat determines your go-to-market strategies and channels to use.
Yeah, very good. We can have a totally separate session just on the IP and the most effective IP protections, and it also is very product dependent in terms of what might be most effective.
Yeah. And in a good case scenario, in a good case scenario, you have it and like ready to go to market.
Yep, excellent. So Adam, what are your thoughts on kind of the product to market piece?
Yeah, I think you made a good point earlier, Matt, just about like, hey, is there a problem that this solves? And it's even beyond that, which is like, good companies are ascending as the market that they're in is expanding, right? Like the last thing that you want is like, just as your company is getting going, the product, the market begins to commoditize and it's starting to shrink, right? So having that understanding of sort of the total addressable market. And I think one of the mistakes that is common of founders is that they do over exaggerate and they say, hey, here is this $70 billion total addressable market, and it's like, okay, great, but like again to my earlier point, like how are you going to go and make a dent in that, right? And I think it's that understanding of, okay, great, like here is this, like the ones that I love are like, okay, here is this big total addressable market that we have the opportunity to go after at some point. Here is the sliver of it that we are starting with that is still large enough to make it like an interesting, right? Because again, like when you think about your audience and these early stage investors, like for them to make money, like there has to be like a big multiple on the company. And so it has to get to a certain size to make it worthwhile, right? Like if you are trying to build a company to a different type of scale, then who you should be talking to is a different type of investor as well too, right? And then I think the other thing that like is happens sometimes is just, especially with new startups, because they have this new paradigm, because they're looking at things differently, is they say like, oh, we don't have any competitors. And it's like, well, there's always competitors, right? Like the Netflix CEO said their biggest competitor is sleep, right? Because that's who they're actually competing against. And so having that understanding of the market and then the competitive landscape, right? Like a lot of companies end up taking a product out approach, which is like, hey, you see this a lot. I worked in an industry. I had a problem. I built something that solved it. Now I assume other people want to as well too. And that's a good place to start. And that product out approach market in approach is equally important, because it's like, hey, these are the differentiators you say, but like, actually, let's compare them now through the actual competitors in the market, and let's find the ones that are actually both differentiated and wanted by the audience and build our strategy around that versus just what we've said we wanted those to be in the comfort of our own, office.
Yeah, and you also want to make sure that, when you present, you bring unbiased data, right? No matter how much you and how and which ways, because there are multiple ways to estimate your market size, right? Like let's say top down, you start to filter down, trying to understand your target audience and try to estimate, conversion rates on one particular market. It's just very important that you leave your friends and family out of it. I heard it a couple of times. It was like, my entire family loves this. It's like, okay. That's not gonna maybe a good ground for investment. Back your sources, make sure it's logical and it's rooted in solid sort of proven assumptions.
So I just want to take a quick detour and just for 30 seconds for each of you. I mean, one of the things that strikes me as you're talking about this as an aside is back it up with data, for example. Don't overstate the size of your addressable market. It's really a matter of, during this pitch, trying to build up trust with the investor as well, right? So can you just talk about that very briefly? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because I think it, again, could be its own presentation. But, the importance of having factual backup or having other things that don't over exaggerate what you bring to the table as part of a process of building up trust and believability with the investor. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that can be several tools to use for that. And you're 100% right. That's very important, right? Because eventually you're selling, right? And at the end of the line, what makes the difference if your audience trusts you and trust the words and your capabilities, whether if it's team, product, or market. And there are several ways that you can build that trust. If you already have early traction, right? You already started to sell, or apps are getting downloaded, or you have, already started to grow a significant sign up list for the launch. That signals interest, right? So try to get as many reasonable signaling into your presentation as much as possible. If you have done market research or you have done survey, and it's got to be a sizable amount of statistically meaningful survey. What were the results, right? So any kind of signal that you're not just making numbers from the thin air, and unfortunately we have some examples of that too occasionally. Try to put that in there as much as possible, right? We're going to talk about a little bit later of not too much is always not the better, right? But that trust building, it's okay if you stretch it a little bit on that part of your pitch, because you really want to make that solid foundation that you know what you're doing. And at the same time, never underestimate your audience. Your audience are going to be verse professionals who've seen a thing or two, and they're going to come with their own assumptions. So even though they might not be necessarily in your field of interest, they do going to have opinions and solid experiences. So make sure that you never underestimate your audience in that.
So Adam, do you have a quick feedback on the trust issue as part of the presentation preparation?
Yeah, I would just say what I said earlier, which is at the early stage, really the investor is betting on you and your ability to execute, right? And and oftentimes some of those exaggerations or some of those things, it's a natural thing. You want to say, here's this big opportunity, here's all these things we're going to do. But then sometimes it backfires when you look at a financial projection slide and it says in 3 years, you're going to grow at this rate. And you're like, well, Facebook didn't do that or Google didn't do that. And it's actually you could reduce that dramatically and still be a very backable, wonderful business. And I think you know what I mean? The ones that get it and understand that are the ones that put that in there. And then that's the investor saying, okay, great, this person gets it.
Yeah. So I think it's just important to keep in mind the trust relationship that you're trying to build. And it is a process, but it really is your first opportunity to appear trustworthy and authentic, and all of the things that go into that, and how important that can be to start to build that relationship that you're trying to at least start with the pitch.
The only thing to add to that is that we also have to remember that this is a two-way relationship, and we want to build trust as the founder to the investor, but the investor should do the same to you as well too, right? There's never been more money out there, and so it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship and trust on both sides.
Another hour-long topic just on that issue. So let's talk a little bit about go-to-market strategy, right? So I think Rita, you alluded to this, right? The product that you have, the IP protections that you have for it are going to help kind of dictate that go-to-market strategy. What are the important things to include in your presentation about not only you have a great product, not only that you have an addressable market, but now how you're going to attack that market, get into that market, and strategize about the best way to start to sell your product?
Adam, I can take this as a starter. Again, don't overshoot, right? When you go to market strategy and you're gonna say phase one, I'm gonna conquer domestic market of the US. That might not gonna be realistic. It's okay to break it down to phases, right? I am, maybe launching through e-commerce, right? And I just, I'm going to stay with an e-commerce model for a while. And then I'm going to, start to tackle as phase two national retailers. And then phase three, maybe I'm looking into private labeling or export. Just make sure that your go-to market strategy is reasonable, it is scalable, and it's always attainable. Because you're going to be starting on a budget, so your go-to-market strategy for phase one is pretty much how you're going to spend that money. So that's a very important slide for your target audience. That's where their money is going to go, essentially.
Adam, what are your thoughts?
Part of the deck, because it's really it's the sort of linchpin of the deck, in the sense of like, you've painted this wonderful vision, you have this huge problem, you're the team that's ready to do it, you have this thing that can do it, and now it's like, you're putting your money where your mouth is, and this is how you're going to do it, right? And you talked about the IP and everything like that, and it's like, what a company really needs is a moat. It needs to create a moat around it that really makes it like difficult for competitors and challengers to go and do what they're doing. And oftentimes, from a technology standpoint, we think of that as technology, but that can also be your go-to-market strategy and how you're selling those things, right? And having that alignment between marketing and sales, and really like having the strategy, and particularly at the early, like you've kind of gone from like, hey, I showed this to my family, now I've gone into my LinkedIn and I've got this product working with 5 of my friends, and now I'm going to go and get it from those lighthouse customers in a scalable, repeatable motion, right? And that's what investors want, is they want to have a sales motion that's scalable and repeatable, and then also aligned to the goals of the company, right? Like, you can't be in your investment asking for a $2 million seed round and then telling me that your go-to-market strategy is enterprise. Like the Oracles and the Microsofts of the world, because the sales cycles for those companies are 24 months and you have, 12 months of runway, right? So it's having the right strategy aligned with all of those things. And that you are, can do it in a scalable, repeatable way. And I think that is becoming even important, right? And one of the pre-webinar emails you sent, Matt, you had a question about related to sort of the reckoning that's happening in tech from a valuation standpoint, from an investment standpoint, et cetera, right? And like the venture world has really been drunk for the last 5 years. And especially like, we're having this conversation in New Hampshire, which is not Silicon Valley, right? And in Silicon Valley, they have there's the joke that 1 million people walk into a bar, nobody buys a drink, it's a huge success. Right? Like, we want in New Hampshire, we prioritize like good, strong, efficient businesses. And that is actually where the market's trending. The growth at any cost is not in vogue right now. People want, potentially smaller, but realistic, doable, efficient businesses. And this is an opportunity to really signal that, which I think is going to help you in your investment pitch.
Yeah, great. So as now you're hitting the market now with your product, right? You've now convinced the investor you have something that hopefully will get into the market and you'll be able to sell it. You talked a little bit about building a moat around the business, protecting it. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how much you should highlight about yourself as the entrepreneur or the business, about what makes that business, that person, that entrepreneur unique. Why will this team, this person, this company be able to execute in a way and get the traction that is so hard to garner when you're starting really from zero? So Adam, what are your thoughts on the maybe some of the other things you want to highlight in your pitch to show how a particular entrepreneur company is unique, not only unique, but better poised than others to be successful?
Yeah, we always talk about that, the differentiators, and people always default to like product differentiators, but the people are differentiators, right? And particularly, it is really hard at the beginning to get traction. And so you as a founder are synonymous with the company. And so what about your background is going to help you get that early traction, right? We work with a company that does virtual reality safety training, right? So instead of like watching the PowerPoint presentation, particularly in the oil and gas space, you can actually, put on the headset and you're on the oil rig and the thing explodes. Now what do you do, right? And one of the signals of that company that we invested in was that the founder had spent 15 years in the oil and gas industry and had all these relationships with the regulators, with the different companies to help get them, right? And you don't want to hide that. You want to make sure that that's part of the presentation, but I think it's something that's sprinkled throughout in the various sections that we did, right? Like that's what goes back. Like if you go and there's like the first 3 slides are just about the founder, that is a little concerning to me as well too, right? Like it's not just a one-person show, it's about the whole process.
Rita.
I would agree. And I would also probably touch base a lot on removing objections, right? That it's okay, great product, great founder, but does have the background, dealt with the regulatory pieces from FDA to USDA, you name it, right? So it's like whatever objections you think that the audience might have after that framework, apart from team, that is, industry relationships, partnerships, collaborations, brand endorsements, other deals that you can, or existing marketing pieces, anything that you can put in before you actually start talking about the money, because, assuming that comes next. Remove any remaining objections, at least, one slide that you can think of. I would suggest that should be added to a pitch deck.
So let me ask you a question. So one of the frustrations that I hear from entrepreneurs sometimes is the only entrepreneurs who are able to get money are those that have already been entrepreneurs and been successful, right? So how important is it when you're looking at an entrepreneur that they show some measure of success in the past, either raising money and having a big exit event, or what other factors would you look to that kind of uniqueness of that person, and why is that person investable while somebody with a similar idea might not be considered as investable? Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think Rita had a thought she wanted to get out first. So I'll let her.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say that Adam goes first, because for me, it's going to come down to attitude, again, because we've seen so many companies that, came out of university and started and have an excellent track record as a scholar, or maybe dropped out as a scholar and still was able to bring great inventions or introduce great products to the market. So it's really fighting those biases. It's better if, and naturally it is somewhat better if you already, close deals, but sometimes it can also hurt you, right? Because what was the deal that you closed, and what was the market and the team, do you have left a disheveled team behind you? So it's a double-edged sword in no matter which way you're looking at. If you have a good product, good market, reasonable go-to-market strategy, and your attitude is right, and you're not completely out of your realm of understanding and expertise, then I think that should be a success.
Yeah, I would say if I could go back to my younger self and just say what would be the number one thing that I would do, it would be to work on, right? Just like I was just a content manager, work on your network, right? Because what is the founder's number one job? It's the number one cheerleader of the company, and the ability to sell that vision to employees, sell it to customers, sell it to prospects, right? And the richer the network that they have, that they're be able to attract that team, so that team slide looks better, right? They're able to attract those advisors, which then now tells me, okay, whatever risk I had of this person, I know that they've been able to have these people that are supporting them, right? They have potential prospects and clients lined up because they have the network, right? And so I think that's something that anybody has control over. They can continue to work on their network, continue to make relationships, make them early so that they're not self-serving and that they're authentic. And then that is going to set you up, because everybody, when you hire somebody, when you invest in somebody, it's all about, can you reduce the risk? And if you have people in your network that are vouching for somebody, then you're far more likely to support and endorse them, whether they've had, previous entrepreneurial success or not.
So as the next part of the presentation, you're going to have to provide some financial information to the potential investors. What level of detail do you really suggest for the financial part of the presentation? How important are projections as part of the financial part of the presentation? And what's the most critical things you want to make sure that you hit on? Rita, what are your thoughts on that?
First, I would definitely start by stating of how are you actually going to make money, right? Like, what are your revenue models? Are you doing an app in-app sales, partnership sales, advertising sales on your app? You're going to use, partner credit. So it stated out clearly of how are you going to make money, and that's going to be reasonable price, it's reasonable market rate, reasonable amount of users and conversion, and a broad and understandable list of revenue legs and revenue sources. So that's where I would start. That this is how I'm gonna make money. This is how this great invention, product, app, or service of mine is going to bring eventually the money back and grow the company that you're about to invest into. So I think that should be the very first financial leg.
Yeah, and I was talking about this deck in these different sections, which is really important, but the reminder is that it has to be a completely unified story, right? And you can't have financial projections that say you're going to, in 3 years, do this amount of money, which then if I looked back at the TAM earlier in the slide, I find out that means you're going to have 75% market share for this thing, right? Or you're going to grow at this pace, but in your go-to-market or in your hires, you're saying you're going to hire one salesperson, and somehow they're going to do the work of 50 salespeople, right? So it's making sure that you have a cohesive strategy and that you have them thought. And like investors know that there's things are going to change. You're so early that there's a lot of factors and X factors that you don't understand, but it's just, is it thoughtful? Are you prepared to go and actually execute against this? Is it all believable?
So as you're wrapping up the presentation, there's the need to eventually get to the point of what it is you're asking for, right? So what are your tips on how best to couch the ask, and how would you want to style it? What would you want to focus on? How do you come up with even what the ask should be? How aggressive do you want to be? And what do you think is appropriate? So Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
Schools have thought about that too, in the sort of the different phases of the startup or the fundraising climate, right? There are some people right now that would say we're going to go into a long winter or whatever, and so you should raise as much money as you possibly can. I think oftentimes founders are easily attracted to sort of the vanity metrics, right? Like the TechCrunch article about how we raised this much, and then they forget a little bit about when you are raising that much, you are diluting yourself as well too, and then that also creates other complexities of the business, like potentially a board, and now you have different bosses, and that might not have even been why you're going into the business. So again, I think the key before any pitch is to really say to have an honest conversation with yourself on what are you trying to build, and then know, okay, great, to get to those goals, what do I need? Right. And I think that's going to come up with a little bit of on the investment side. Hey, listen, I need $1 million, because if I get that $1 million and I inject that into where I am, that means in a year from now, I'm going to be at break even, and then I can start being profitable. And then I have all the options in the world. Right. Or you could say, man, I have this huge opportunity. This is really a real estate grab. I've got to be first to market. So I need to raise X amount of money or else I'm going to be left in the dust. Right.
Let me ask you this: is it helpful to couch it in terms of trying to raise enough money so that you get to the next level in your business that adds a significant amount of value or perceived value in the business, so that hey, look, I could raise 500 and I could get to here, but really to really juice up the value of the company, I need 750 or $1 million, because that's really going to then exponentially blow up the value of what I've got, and that $1 million is going to be worth a lot more to me than 500 now and 500 later, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's also the work the way backwards as well too, which is okay, we are doing this amount of revenue, or we have these different things. I can see through the market that a company at this stage is worth this. So then, okay, how much am I willing to? What percentage of the ownership of the company am I willing to give up to get that money as well too, right? But you're right. Sometimes people ask for too little. And then they find themselves in a situation where, ooh, I wish I had done a little bit more. Now we need a little bit of a bridge, and then things become complicated as well, right? And I think Rita had something you want to say.
Right, and to Matt's point, sometimes it's very seductive to ask as much as possible, right? Because who wouldn't want that for their startup or company, and sometimes it does come with the appear bigger concept, right? The more that I ask, I appear bigger. But it also runs the risk of overshooting oneself, right? That it's already hard to make meaningful investor relationships, right? And nothing kills it faster than overshooting yourself because you didn't study your audience enough, or you went too greedy, for the lack of the better word, and you could have had a very good amount of angel funds, for example, but you were shooting more than they could have extended themselves. So usually what I recommend for my clients is everything costs more as you go along with a startup. Everything costs more than what you budgeted for. So what's your reasonable base rate that you think that you can get yourself to that desired phase 1 or desired launch or a desired objective that you had in your market strategies, and add that 10-15% buffer. And sometimes that could be a 20% buffer, but don't double it and don't triple it, because first, it's also harder sometimes to spend that money wisely. And if you don't spend every money and every penny from that earning to fuel the business and fine tune all the fueling steps for the business, whether if it's your marketing, whether if it's tech and development or hiring, you just burn through and you lost that trust and credit. So bigger is not always better.
Absolutely. So no, great point. And we're coming up to the 1 o'clock hour here, so we're almost running out of runway. And I just wanted to ask maybe a key question, really. What is the right time for companies to start to think about the pitch, and when should they be aiming to have their pitch? What's too early? And maybe conversely, maybe you know better, but what's too late? Just 30 seconds from each of you on that. Rita, what's your thought?
Have already somewhat sort of an IP protected and some iteration of the product either after launch that can already be presented and moved along in the market faster.
And I would just say, you should always be thinking about the pitch, because the exercise of putting that deck together, regardless of if you're pitching or not, is going to make you build a stronger business.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We have a couple of slides maybe that we can show here that summarize the kind of the 8 parts of what the pitch deck is and some other tips. They'll be here momentarily, but they're also available to you. Feel free to reach out to Stephanie, who's lurking in the ethos here, and can take your request to get them to you if you want to just keep them for posterity. So thank you, everybody, for attending, for listening. Hope this was helpful to you. Good luck with your pitches. And Stephanie, I'm not sure if you want to come back and sign off. I know we have one other event coming up that you might want to talk about. And other than that, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adam and Rita and Matt. This was great. As a reminder, all of this information is going to be on the Tech Alliance website, which is just nhtechalliance.org. These webinars, which is a 3-part series, as well as our other startup resources and programming that we do have available. So thank you all once again, and thank you Coughlin for sponsoring this series. I think the information provided today and through the other 2 presentations as well is incredibly valuable to many people.
The next one is, when's the next one, Stephanie?
Sure, the next one's next Wednesday, and we'll be hearing from companies who have received investment and how they used that investment wisely to grow and scale their businesses. So if you are watching this in the future, it is on our website. And if you are watching this now, please sign up next week as well. So thank you all for being here.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, panelists. And like I said, good luck to the audience on your pitches. Thanks, everybody.